China has just wrapped up its biggest annual plenary event in Beijing, the 2 sessions of the national legislature and the country's top political advisory body. This is the go-to source for clarity and clues to understanding what China's leaders have in mind for the recovery of the world's second-largest economy and managing escalating tensions with a US-led Western alliance. How bad is the state of China's economy? Who will prevail in the tech war the US is waging against China? What are the chances of a real war over Taiwan or the South China Sea? To answer these questions and more, we have our executive editor and resident China expert, Chow Chung-yan, on this episode of Talking Post. Chung-yan, thanks for joining us. It's that time of the year again. We have a major event in Beijing, the end of the 2 sessions. And this is the time of the year when everyone is watching China to get signals as to where the world's second largest economy is going. The narrative, if you've read from all the experts overseas, on television, in newspapers, is that generally all this implies that China will be dictated by national security and full party control going forward. Now, of course, in many ways, this is a very simplistic view of it, even a simpleton's view of it. That is why I turn to you to give us a reality check, right? Now, feeding right into that narrative, of course, what you've seen from the 2 sessions is that China's parliament, the National People's Congress, has just passed a law that effectively gives the CCP tighter control over the cabinet. So that feeds into this whole total control narrative. What exactly is it, actually?
Well, I think the Communist Party has been unapologetically saying that China is a one-party dictatorship. I mean, they are not going to apologize for that. They are not denying it. They are actually seeing this as a strength of the China's political system. Mind you that they are talking about this is a dictatorship of the party, meaning that the party will always be the ruling party. The argument is that the party does not have to face all this kind of election pressure and all that. So it can focus on the long view. It can focus on planning China's future 10 years in advance, 20 years in advance. And the party itself, that doesn't mean that the party itself won't have to face the public pressure, because the party's mission is always that it needs to deliver. Its mandate comes from the fact that it can deliver what it promised to the Chinese people. So in other words, it is the results that or the governance of the party that gave it the mandate. It's not through the election, which they think is chaotic. It's a lot of time focused on the short term, and then a lot of time is a focus on the show. So this, you can argue which system is better to the end of the time, but this has always been, in a sense, part of the Chinese political legacy for at least 2,000 years. Yeah.
So why is it happening now? For so many years, this was not the system, right? But now, isn't there also a danger that everything gets bottlenecked up at the party in terms of making practical decisions on the ground by the State Council?
I think that's a bit misunderstanding that, in fact, in China, the party is always in control. There's never been any doubt about that. People talking about the State Council, the party, but you have to remember, every senior member of the State Council, they are communist member themselves. So they first of all have to obey and follow the party rules and the party regulation and the party instruction. Now, there were a time when China tried to experiment different sort of setup or the arrangement. There were a time, particularly immediately after the Cultural Revolution, there was a sort to separate the state and the party. This is a part of the reform, political reform effort. But then they quickly realized that this can also cause problems. I think particularly the 2 things. One is that the study of the collapse of the Soviet Union. One of the lessons you can take from that is that when you have ambiguous power structure, when the party center whose authority and whose power is not clearly defined, and then it will open a lot of gaps and create a lot of issues. The other thing is the rampant corruption problem. This is partly, but the factors that contribute to the corruption, of course, are very complicated. But one big part is that the breakdown of the party discipline. So when Xi Jinping came to power, one of the biggest political promise he made to the party and to the people is to clean the house, to solve China's corruption problem, which back then, if you ask Chinese people, this was the #1 political issue for them. Everyone complained about corruption. People hold different view, people come from different background, but they all talk about the evil of corruption. So for Xi, his answer to that is to reintroduce a sense of purpose and also discipline to the Communist Party. So this is a process of re-centralization of power within the party to make the party's power structure clear, leave no room for ambiguity, because all these are required when you want to strengthen the party discipline.
So centralization of power, is this also related to one of the biggest talking points that the international media in particular focused on a lot, which was the premier of China? For 30 years, it has always been a tradition at the end of the 2 sessions after delivering their work report that they face the international media and they field all kinds of questions. Of course, this is the Communist Party, this is China, and press conferences of this nature are, of course, controlled, but at the same time, there is some kind of openness where the man in charge faces a hostile media, especially an international media, and then answers every question, blow for blow, right? And they stopped that. So all the speculation here again is on this consolidation of power, Xi Jinping as one individual power source, that kind of stuff. Is it that simple?
I think it's totally understandable that the fact that they cancelled the premier's annual press conference become the one topic that dominated the 2 sessions. Because we have to bear in mind not only to foreign media, but it's also a big shock to a lot of the Chinese people here. Because the thing is that the premier's annual press conference has been a tradition for 30 years. So this is always one of the highlight of the 2 sessions. And because the policies can be very complicated, can be boring, can be hard to understand for the public. But this is one occasion. They see that the man behind this policy come out and talk to the public and explain. So this is actually a very important channel for communication and for all sorts of reasons. But why they canceled the premier's press conference? I think that maybe we will only have the official answer or the final answer years from now. But then there are some clues to this. One is that, as I said, China has been on a path to restructure to re-centralize the power and to reform its power structure. Actually, 10 years ago, and particularly after the 20th Party Congress, that's a deliberate effort to make sure that, first of all, party is the ultimate source of power and the decision maker in China. The second thing is that to really crystallize the relationship between the party and the state council, which is the government. In the past, in China, there's this phase of the South Court and the North Court. It's referring that at the power center, the Zhongnanhai. So the party organ, by and large, occupy one side, and then the government, the state council, occupy the other side. And the people say there's like a 2 almost equal power center, check and balance each other. But this kind of concept in today, of course, become no longer relevant because Xi made it very clear. He thinks that this kind of structure actually create a lot of gaps, create a lot of ambiguity, and that is not good for the country's stability. So that's an effort to redefine the relationship. So this year, one of the highlights is also the so-called the organic law, which basically is a law to redefine the state council's mandate, its reporting structure, and its relationship with the party. So it's this press conference cancellation is not happening in isolation. You have to connect it with other events happening. Then it's not really a surprise. The aim is very simple. The aim is to make it sure to everyone that who is the ultimate decision maker. And then it's also to send out the message is that for China, the government increasingly is going to be the key decision implementation, and the party will be the decision maker. And then also, also people question the real value of the premier's press conference, because as you say, Yonden, you say that the premier every year come out and face the hostile media, but it's actually not the case. We know that the questions are submitted beforehand, has been carefully screened, and then the whole thing is actually quite scripted. The thing about the premier's conference is every year you have media from all over the world. So they will select different media from different countries. A lot of this question in the end become related to foreign policy. Today, the China's premier's job duty and the profile become very different. Portfolio become very different from the 10 years ago. The premier's job is largely on economic policy making, on public welfare, on people's livelihood. The so-called the grand strategy, the foreign policy part, is everyone knows the ultimate decision, the ultimate grand strategy decision maker is Xi Jinping. Now, I talked about the reason, but I also wanted to talk a bit about the problems of this decision. We also need to remember that this is still the only opportunity for top Chinese leaders to come out, face the public, face the world media, to answer the question, regardless whether the questions are spontaneous or prearranged. This is still the one opportunity for them to engage. Now, the perception about China is China becoming increasingly less transparent, and the people don't actually understand the policy. So China itself has been talking about it, has been misunderstood by the West, but this is really a missed opportunity for China to engage the public, to really send out your message. In my view.
That's exactly the point I wanted to raise with you as well, the opacity. So it's one thing to explain China as this is the system. It's very distant from the Western system, and it's very different from their expectations. But at the same time, the fact remains that there's a whole world out there that does not understand China properly. So hence, this kind of thing is important. We still don't have an explanation for what happened to Qin Gang, the former foreign minister, or concrete explanation, and why Wang Yi is now in charge, right? So this is, like you said, the danger here is that people don't understand China, and then there's no attempt to explain by themselves. You've been covering the two sessions for 2 weeks. You've been managing our coverage. You've been overseeing how we do everything. And it must be tough because everything is in a black box, right? There's so little information that's coming out to you, apart from officially what they deign is worth disseminating.
Yes, I think it's not just for SCMP. I think it's for all the journalists, including the mainland journalists. The thing is that the access to information in China become more difficult, and then the policy interpretation become more difficult, and this adds to the overall perception that is China is become more hard to figure out. This actually can be a problem for China in the sense that it first of all, create a sense of if you want to trust a country, you have to at least be able to understand it. So the moment that you can't really figure out what's going on, if there's no any kind of convincing and also easy to understand explanation from China itself, then it also creates room for all sorts of people to come up with alternative explanation. So this is, in a sense, in my view, in terms of the public image, China is creating problem for itself.
So among all the speculation about Li Qiang's, the lack of Li Qiang's press conference, one of the theories put forward is, they want to hide information about the state of China's economy and avoid awkward questions about that. But then if you look at his work report and if you look at everything that came out of the two sessions, it's pretty clear. They've set out the economic direction and what are their plans, what their strategy is. Can you break that down for us? Is the state of China's economy, is it as good as Beijing says, or is it as bad as it's made out to be by the foreign media in particular?
Yeah, I understand that there are a lot of skepticism to China's economy, and some people question whether the 5.2% growth reported last year, is that credible? Is that trustworthy? And a lot of people also question the target of around 5% growth this year, whether that is achievable. I don't think the reason behind the cancellation of the premier annual press conference is to do with this. One theory say that maybe the leadership is not aware of on-the-ground situation. Maybe they live in their own information bubble. So they will only feed with positive news. And then they actually really believe that the China's economy is not in dire shape. But by talking to various people, I think that the likelihood of this theory, I would think, is quite low. I think that all the Chinese leaders, this current crop of Chinese leaders, they experienced the Cultural Revolution. They understand the danger of losing connection with the grassroots and become isolated in the information bubble. They take extra step to send a lot of people out to do the fact-finding. Actually, the fact-finding become a very central part of the policy making. I questioned the Chinese officials whether the 5.2% growth is credible. The answer is that they have tried to make it as solid as possible. They say that it's true throughout the world, no matter which government, cannot say that the statistics are 100%. So, but China is not making any kind of deliberate effort to hide that number. So from the local, of course, there are some kind of problems, but I don't think it's a very serious or systematic fabrication going on. So last year, there are areas that China is struggling. Property sector, the financial market, consumption, domestic consumption, not as strong as expected, all true. But you also need to see that China has a lot of bright spot as well. So you have the EV industry booming, you have the new energy, solar energy, wind energy, etc. And then you also have the advanced manufacturing. So the argument is that what you are seeing in China is not a recession. It's a restructuring of the economy.
So all this is well and good, Chung-yan, but then let's not forget the massive elephant in the room, which is the most powerful country in the world, the United States, and its determination to stop China's technological advancement. Everything that China is trying to do in terms of its economy and its technology and its strategy, it's a lot of it, or most of it, you would say, is based on the fortunes of 1.5 billion people. But that is not what the US is looking at. The US is looking at containing China. So therefore you have this ridiculous nonsense going on right now about this concerted effort to ban TikTok, which is the biggest joke going on. But then we're living in times where it's beyond the twilight zone, where this harmless little app where children slap each other with tortillas is suddenly a weapon of mass destruction that China is unleashing on the world. So you're up against that. China is up against that. How is it going to fare in this battle?
Well, I will say that all this technology restriction and containment policy actually become the fuel to really make the Chinese leadership determined. They are actually seeing it as a justification why China really needs to push for technology renovation and all that. Because short of your own effort, then China will be forever confined to the low end of the production chain. That means that the country will always be stuck at this stage. Now, people talk about China becoming an affluent society, but you have to bear in mind, this is a 1.4 billion population country. And the middle class is roughly 400 to 500 million. That means the vast majority of the population is still in the low income basket. For Chinese government to realize the dream of returning China to become a developed country, for the Communist Party to really deliver its promise to its people and to stay in power, they have to restructure the economy, have to move China up in the value production chain. That means, but they are facing a very different environment, because for the so-called other Asian tigers, Japan, Korea, Singapore, you name it, they actually don't face this. They didn't face this kind of technology restriction from the West. Now, even for Japan, at some stage, U.S. Saw Japan as a potential threat, but then I will argue the kind of restriction on Japan has never been so extensive. So the Chinese elite here, they have no illusion that the U.S. is going to change its course. So that is why today it's even more important for China to become really focused on developing its tech.
So Chung-yan, you know when we're talking about TikTok, when you're talking about curbing the rise of China, you always hear this phrase bandied about all the time. I hear this all the time. I read this in the Western media, the foreign press all the time. The China threat, China threat, China threat, China threat. So I want to ask you, what is the China threat, if it even exists at all? And related to that, what can we expect in the year ahead regarding cross-strait tensions and also China's problems in the South China Sea with its neighbors, the risk of war?
I would say that the China threat is both propaganda, but also real. There are a different level of, or different version of China threat. So the one version is to paint China as this revisionist power, a country that is not satisfied with the world status quo and want to change the world order to its favor. And not only that, but willing to do so by using violence, by using all sorts of ways to achieve that goal. So the China is painted as a sinister power, as an aggressor, as a troublemaker. And a lot of the time is mentioned in the same breath as Russia, and they're trying to paint both countries as this revisionist power, a threat to the global order. Now, to Beijing, they very much resent and reject this portrayal, because they argue that it's not based on fact. Now, if you look at the so-called the five major powers, so the five permanent UN Security Council member, China is the only member who hasn't fought a foreign war for the past 3 or 4 decades. Now, China had border disputes with Philippines, with India, with a lot of its neighbors. But so far, China has always tried to use the diplomatic means to resolve this conflict. There are clashes over the China-India border, but these are very controlled clash, never break into full conflict. we're still seeing it on TV almost every week. The kind of clash between Philippine maritime police and ship with the Chinese coast guards and all that. But there's the kind of open conflict we see in Gaza or Ukraine. Now, if you think that a lot of the great power, how they react to this kind of border dispute, if you look at India, how India handled its border issue with Pakistan. If you look even, U.S., how many wars U.S. have fought, all this for Chinese people is very hard for them to accept that you paint them as this revisionist power. Where's the evidence? And they also can argue, if you look at just over the past 2 years, if you look at what China has been doing, no matter it's over Ukraine or over Gaza, people accuse China of siding with Russia. But to China, China actually think this accusation is problematic because China is not arming Russia. China is not actually has been trying very carefully to stay out of that conflict. And what China has been trying to do is to argue that this war is rooted in the political problems, and it needs to have a political solution to that. Now, over Gaza, the same. So China has been very much trying to talk about a peace solution, a peace resolution to the issue. You can say that these are just gestures, but at least they are not trying to aggravate the conflict. They are not adding fuel to the fire. Another version of China's threat theory. This is that the structurally that China, when it puts so much focus on technology, on moving up the production ladder, on upgrading its manufacturing and etc., it inevitably will have a structural conflict with the West. Because if you look at the global economy for our lifetime, the West basically they occupy the tip of the pyramid. So they basically occupy the most high value added part of the production chain. They are the one who come up with all this new technology. They take the most from profit from a product because they are the one who provides the technology, provides the tool, provides the capital. Now, you have a country of China's size now trying to move up that ladder. Now, when one thing move up, then the one who occupy that space will face competition. This is why even if you talk to people who are not holding such a critical view of China, they are worried about overcapacity. Now, overcapacity, in other words, is that people fighting for the market. So it's competition. And in this kind of competition, you're bound to face the threat from China to replace you. So that's, in a sense, I would say is real. And it is something that will require China and the West it is going to be a very difficult negotiation process for them to eventually find a position where both sides can accept and accommodate each other. It will take a while for that to happen.
You and I talked about the approaches, the way China plays this game and the way the West plays this game. The West plays chess and checkmate. You defeat your opponent and you kill him there. Whereas China plays Go, which is not about defeat, which is about taking away stuff from your opponent and eventually getting him to surrender, right?
Yeah. So the Go game, if you play it, you understand that it's not about checkmate your opponent. It's all about building up your position of advantage, and then reduce your opponent's space and reduce its positional advantage until it comes to a point your opponent realizes there's no point to continue and concede to you. Now, the chess is very different. The chess is all about capture the king. You have to make the most drastic move. You sometimes need to sacrifice your pieces in order to create that one opening that you can make the killer's move. Now, earlier, Yonden, you asked about China's position in Taiwan and South China Sea, etc. I don't believe Chinese government is preparing for the imminent conflict, because precisely as in the Go game. Now, if you want to just storm Taiwan and take it by force, the consequences, even in the scenario of China winning the war, will be very disastrous. Because Taiwan, if you look at the map, Taiwan sits at the heartland of China's economic zone. The Shanghai is close to Taiwan, Hong Kong is close to Taiwan, Fujian is close to Taiwan. All these are China's economic heartland. And Taiwan itself is very important for the global semiconductor industry, but also for the global economy. And Chinese leader also see that the Taiwanese people, they are Chinese people. So a war in, over Taiwan Strait will be Chinese fighting Chinese. It will run counter to the Chinese government's, Chinese leadership's dream of returning China to the top line, to the front row of great power, and restore the glory. So I think the war will only happen when they feel there's no other option left. They will not let Taiwan go. No government in China can survive losing Taiwan. So that is really the bottom line. But if they still have option, they will try not to do that. But that doesn't mean that they will just fold their arms and do nothing. They will use every advantage. They will gradually build up the advantage, both in terms of the military advantage, economic advantage, and using every means to gradually erode the Taiwan's position and also the U.S. presence here. So I still believe that China is making preparation for the worst, but then doing everything they can for the peaceful unification. This will be what we call a salami slicing tactic, not aiming for one killer move, but by gradually building up the advantage over your opponent.
And of course, for the Taiwanese people, if there are any elements there who are in favor of a war or conflict with China, you can always look at Ukraine as an example to see how much a country can suffer when it has the US overseeing everything, and then you land in the middle of a war there. So I think that there's a lesson to be learned there by everyone looking at it in the Taiwan context. So anyway, that brings us to the end of the show. Thank you so much for helping us understand China just a little bit better. I think understanding is so important, understanding the world in these really toxic times, more important than ever. So thank you very much, Chung-yan.
Thank you.